Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of You've Gotta See This, your guide to what's playing in theaters and at home. I'm your host Brad, joined by my co-host Blake. Blake, how was this week for you?
At the theater, it was pretty slow, but we got the Oscars this week, so that was awesome.
Yeah, it was an awesome week for movies with the Oscars. We'll talk about that a little bit after we've talked about what movies are playing this week. So first up, we have Birds of Prey. In Birds of Prey, Harley Quinn returns with a new crew to cause more mayhem in Gotham and track down a priceless diamond. This one stars Margot Robbie, Ewan McGregor, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Rosie Perez, Joni Smollett-Bell, and Ella J. Basco. The cast is awesome, but I think Ella J. Basco is kind of the weaker link in the movie as Cassandra Cain. She doesn't give the best delivery of some of her lines. There's a couple of ones that stood out to me where I was like, that could have been a little bit better. We went with that take, really? But, I mean, it's a small complaint because the rest of this cast is amazing, especially Ewan McGregor. He is having the time of his life as Black Mask, and he's totally hamming it up in the best way possible. Margot Robbie, again, does an amazing job of bringing Harley Quinn to life. She kills it way more than she did in Suicide Squad, in my opinion. This movie did a pretty good job of essentially erasing the importance of Suicide Squad by literally blowing up the relationship she had with Joker. There are a handful of nods to Suicide Squad, but it doesn't really carry over any of the story or characters besides Harley, and I appreciated that. The action is really well done and engaging. The stunt work is really, really awesome in this movie. There's just really well done fight sequences, really interesting uses of weapons that especially baseball bats. There's one scene in particular that's amazing where Harley Quinn just goes crazy with a baseball bat. All of the new characters are really interesting and entertaining and funny, and the whole movie is really funny. It has a really dark, twisted sense of humor, but that works for the Harley character, even if sometimes that humor feels a little bit forced. It's basically DC's answer to Deadpool with just tons of gore, fourth wall breaks, crazy action set pieces through the whole thing, and it's an absolute blast through and through because it takes full advantage of the fact that it's rated R and makes room for more of the more mature Harley antics that we've seen in the comic books and other places with Harley Quinn. And in my opinion, it's totally welcome. Unfortunately, the story is pretty basic and easy to see what's going to happen next. And the scenes between the action sequences are pretty predictable, and some of the jokes don't always land right, but I can see what they were going for. The movie's fun, so it's easy to forgive, but I have one complaint about this movie is the fact that they wasted the character of Zsasz. They turned him into henchman number one instead of this rich character that he is in the comics and the video games and everywhere else that you can see this character. They just turned him into a glorified henchman and kind of stripped away what makes him him. So that was my biggest complaint with it, is I felt that they wasted one of the best Batman villains that they had out there. But other than that, I think it is a solid DC entry, and I give Birds of Prey a 3.5 out of 5.
Yeah, DC finally gets it, I think. I think that they understand what they're going for now. They're going for these great individual, standalone, R-rated comic book movies, and I think that the market needs stuff like that right now, and I love that DC is making these movies, and they're making them as good as they are, because from Joker to this now, like, go ahead, keep making individual movies. You don't have to have them connect to a larger universe in any way. They can be R-rated. You can do whatever you want as far as the violence goes, and I think this movie takes really good advantage of the use of violence and the use of language. I think that the use of fucks and everything are really, really funny in this movie. I think that it works just like in a Deadpool kind of way. Margot Robbie is the perfect Harley Quinn, and this movie really, really proves that. She really gets to shine. In Suicide Squad, she was really overly sexualized, and that was kind of what most of her character was. But you could still see a good performance through that, and you could still tell that she was emulating Harley Quinn in Suicide Squad through that overly sexualized performance. And in this movie, they take away all of the sexual aspects of Harley Quinn, basically, and just make her the comic book character that she truly is, and it works really, really well, and Harley Quinn is the standout of the movie. I also think that Ewan McGregor is hilarious in the movie. He's chewing up all the scenery, he's yelling, and he's going through every emotion on his face in every scene. He goes through every single emotion, and it's hilarious. I think that Zsasz is totally wasted, like you were saying. Zsasz Zaz is this crazy, super dark character that can only work in an R-rated movie, and he was like the most tame person in the entire movie as far as violence goes, and it's kind of crazy because Zaz is fucked up. He kills people and then marks his body with each kill. He's a serial killer in the Batman universe, and in this he was just, like you said, henchman number one. I think that overall it's a solid supporting cast. I actually liked the cop character, the cop lead. What was
Rosie Perez?
Yeah, Rosie Perez. I liked her one-liners and the way that she was kind of like in Law and Order or NCIS or something. I thought that was a really funny, weird quirk that they added to her character. I thought she played it really, really well. Huntress is a really big standout for me in this movie as far as like these supporting characters goes. I don't think any of them were really developed particularly well or anything, but they had cool moments. I think that Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Huntress had the coolest moments. No surprise there that Mary Elizabeth Winstead did something cool. She's always awesome. This movie has really, really good stunt work, like you were saying. There's some of the best like straight hand-to-hand combat that I've seen in a superhero movie since Winter Soldier, probably.
Apparently, some of the people who did the fight choreography for John Wick 3 worked on Birds of Prey to do the fight choreography.
That makes sense then. That makes sense, because it has definitely a John Wick, Winter Soldier kind of feel to it, but like a little bit more brutal than Winter Soldier. Overall, like, I think this movie is really funny. I think it's consistent. I think that it doesn't feel too long to me or too short. My biggest complaint of it is really just that it's about these people going after a diamond, and it's just kind of the most basic, generic story. It's that, and I think that the movie too often tries to emulate and kind of copycat Deadpool in situations, and that's kind of its biggest detriment, is like it's also one of its biggest strengths in a way, is that it's like they see what Marvel does right, or what these other studios are doing right with their comic book properties, and they realize, okay, Harley Quinn could definitely work in that kind of way, and they do that to good effect, but then sometimes it's just too much. It's just overdone, and it just feels like they're copying Deadpool a little bit. But overall, like, this is a really, really solid movie. I want DC to keep going this direction. I love their characters, and I love their villains especially, so keep giving me R-rated villain DC movies. I'm going 4 out of 5 for this one.
Awesome. Hard to argue with that. Next, we're going to be talking about Come to Daddy, which is playing in limited theatrical release and is available on video on demand right now. In Come to Daddy, a man attempts to reconnect with his father at a cabin after being estranged from him for 30 years. Starring Elijah Wood, Stephen McHattie, and Martin Donovan, Elijah Wood anchors the whole movie with another solid performance in an incredibly weird indie horror comedy, which he seems to love, that type of genre. The story is absolutely insane and impossible to guess what's going to happen next. There's some good twists in there and really, really great practical gore effects. This is a very, very gory movie, so if you don't have a strong stomach, avoid it. It is kind of a slow burn at first, but once it gets going and it's insanity, it's a lot of fun. There's some things that don't really make sense, but this is like a cult horror B movie, so I think that's kind of to be expected. It's almost impossible to talk about the story without giving away massive spoilers, but just know that it's about a lot more than just an estranged father and son reconnecting with each other. There's some absolutely over-the-top crazy shit that happens, and some really great over-the-top hammy performances, which again comes with the B-movie territory, but you can tell Stephen McHattie is having fun playing the alcoholic creep father figure. Unfortunately, the ending isn't very satisfying in my opinion, and that's the biggest complaint I had with it, is that it didn't really stick the landing for me. But ultimately, I had some fun with Come to Daddy, and I gotta give it a 2.5 out of 5.
Yeah, what the fuck, dude? This was so weird. I was not really a fan of this movie. It has a very, very strange offbeat tone to it in a way that I didn't really like. It feels like it almost has a specific vision and a specific tone to it, but it doesn't quite get there, if that makes sense. It's not a very satisfying movie. The first 30 minutes are kind of like abysmally slow and boring, and I didn't care about what was going on. I'm not a fan of B movies, and of I'm not a fan of these B movies or movies that are like supposed to be like cult hits or whatever. Like, I just don't understand the logic behind I'm gonna make a movie bad on purpose. I don't really understand that, and that's kind of like what B movies are to me, but that's kind of like what this movie was to me. there's not really a lot to say about this movie, if I'm being completely honest. It's just very weirdly paced. It has a very strange sense of humor. It's for very, very specific kind of crowd and kind of person. And I don't think that this is definitely not a movie I can recommend to anybody, like, because I'm somebody that sees tons of movies and sees everything, and I didn't even enjoy it. I don't really see a lot of people enjoying it unless you're really into B horror movies and super indie horror movies with a lot of gore, and there's not like a lot of like character work or like anything really going on. The first 30 minutes and the last like 15 minutes are the worst parts of the movie, and that's kind of that's really weak for me. Like whenever that can't really happen. Your movie kind of lives and dies by the beginning and end, and whenever your middle is kind of like pretty good and then the ending and beginning aren't good at all, that's a problem. I think Elijah Wood is fine, and like he does his job and he's good, and he's kind of having fun with it. His haircut's ridiculous. He looks like such a douchebag in the movie, and you can tell that he has fun doing these types of movies because these are the kind of movies that he like grew up watching and that he loved as a kid, and he has whatever money that he wants now so that he can make these movies. So it's really good for him, and I'm happy that he gets to do these, but they're not for me. I'm going 1.5 out of 5.
All right. Yeah, definitely not for everyone. It is pretty short, too. It's only an hour and a half long, so I think that it's paced pretty well for an hour and a half long movie, but it does take about like 20-30 minutes to get going. So I do agree with that, definitely. All right, so what's playing at home this week? We have Horse Girl on Netflix. And Horse Girl, an awkward young woman, begins to unravel when she can't separate her dreams from her real life. Blake, what did you think about Horse Girl?
This movie is a heartbreaking look at someone going through an increasingly difficult time with their mental health, and it's very difficult to watch. There's a lot that it deals with as far as mental health and mental illness goes. The lines between fantasy and reality get blurred a lot, and you're not really sure what to believe. Kind of like our main character and kind of like the struggles that she's going through during the movie. It makes for a very confusing ride, just tonally and story-wise. You're not really sure what to believe and what's truly going on and what isn't going on. I think that Alison Brie is just like outstanding here. She does such a good job of playing this possibly schizophrenic woman that it goes through her family, and her family lineage deals with mental health, and she's dealt with mental health, and she's kind of breaking down, and she does such a perfect job of playing this person slowly spiraling out of control. I'm not really sure what the movie was trying to say, though. I'm not really sure what the message was here. I'm not really sure the greater thing we're supposed to learn from this movie. That's kind of its biggest takeaway for me. Is it's a very, very confusing, heartbreaking look at this person falling apart, and there's not really anything else to it for me. It just kind of feels a little bit hollow. I feel like there's a lot that you could say in the messaging of this movie that isn't really said, if that makes sense. It just feels like it's missing something in its messaging, and it's not all the way there. It's not fully realized in what it's trying to say. It's definitely not like any movie that I've seen recently. I can say that for sure. And I love whenever a filmmaker takes risks and does something different and unique. And this movie is very different, very unique, very much one of a kind. I'm never going to watch this movie again, and it doesn't really stick with me too much beyond the performance. The movie as a whole doesn't really stick with me because I feel like it didn't have like a strong message or a strong stance on anything, and it felt a little bit hollow. But the performance is very, very good, and I think that it's an interesting enough look at this woman breaking down that I'm giving it just barely a fresh review, quote unquote. I'm giving it a 3 out of 5.
Okay. So, Horse Girl stars Alison Brie, Molly Shannon, Debbie Ryan, and Jay Duplass. And like you were talking about, this movie is absolutely heartbreaking. It's a look at someone having a mental breakdown, possibly living with paranoid schizophrenia. And Alison Brie is just phenomenal in this role. She's totally believable as Sarah, this initially shy, awkward, reserved girl that quickly starts to lose her grip on reality. The way that we experience the hallucinations along with her really brings you into her journey and makes you question every scene you're watching, whether it's happening in her head, it's a dream, or if it's actually happening in reality. All of the surrounding cast is really great, especially the guy that plays the character Darren. He's really, really fantastic in this movie. It's really well paced and moves along smoothly. It's got a good length of an hour and 44 minutes with credits. It could have lost maybe like 5 to 10 minutes, and still gotten the same effect across. But other than that, I thought it was a pretty well paced, pretty well edited. Netflix is the perfect place for a kind of strange, unique character study like this because it is so out there and it isn't your typical type of movie. I think that this is a character study first and foremost, so I don't think that there is really like a bigger message at hand in it. I think it's more a performance movie where you're watching it for the performance that Alison Brie gives. It's definitely not for everyone because of how unusual the format is and how the dreams bleed into reality and reality bleeds into the dreams, and it's brutally uncomfortable, but it gives you a new perspective on those that struggle with mental illnesses like this. I thought it was really well executed and affecting, and I'm giving Horse Girl a 3.5 out of 5.
Word.
So next we're going to talk about Dr. Sleep, one of my favorite movies of 2019. 30 years after the events of The Shining, Danny Torrance sets out to help a little girl as well as conquer some of his own demons. Blake, what did you think of Dr. Sleep?
Much like Blade Runner 2049, it's a worthy sequel that nobody saw, which really, really sucks. Everyone needs to see this movie. If you've seen The Shining, which I know you've seen The Shining, so you got to see this movie. It is almost as good as The Shining, and that's insane because The Shining is one of the best horror movies ever made. There's really, really good scares and really good tension building, incredible visual effects. Just this movie looks gorgeous. The visual effects are astounding here. Rose the Hat is an immediately iconic cinematic horror villain from the very first scene that you see her in. I put Rose the Hat in my conversation with Jigsaw and Jason and Michael Myers, like one of the best horror icons ever. Like just and help me with the name of the actress that plays her.
Rebecca Ferguson
just really brings this character to life, fully realized, literally from the first scene, the first frame you see her in, you're like, she's engaging and intense and scary and all the things you need from a horror character. One of the best horror villains in years. Ewan McGregor does a really great job in this movie of playing the broken, older version of Danny who's trying to build himself back together while coming to terms with his past demons that he struggled with in the first movie that he had to put away. Not just that, but his other past demons of alcoholism and possible drug abuse. And you really see him struggle to build himself back up at the beginning of the movie, and then later on in the film struggle to keep it all together. I think that this is just such an incredible psychological drama as well as a horror movie. There's so much that they say here about mental health here again. Like, I think there's a lot to be said about Danny and his struggles and with PTSD and what he goes through and everything, and the techniques with which he goes through to come to terms with who he is and the struggles that he has in his life. I just think that this movie is so expertly directed. It's expertly written. The only negative to this movie is, and I have not seen the director's cut, so the only negative to this movie is that there's not enough of it. Like, there's 2 moments where there are significant time jumps in the story, and I just wanted more there. Like, I just needed a little bit more from the story, and this is like a 2.5 hour movie or something, and I needed a little bit more. That's really the only negative that I can say. The plot, I think, is really, really good. It's, like I said, it's visually striking. There's incredible acting here, and Rose the Hat is iconic, and I think that's the greatest contribution that this film gave to the horror world, is the character of Rose the Hat. And overall, this movie, I'm giving this movie a 4 out of 5. The only reason it's not a little bit higher than that is I needed a little bit more. Like, whenever there's an 8-year time jump, there's a lot that you're expecting me to just go along with, and I wasn't fully there for it. I needed a little bit more.
Gotcha.
But 4 out of 5.
Great score, I think. So Dr. Sleep stars Ewan McGregor, Rebecca Ferguson, Cliff Curtis, Bruce Greenwood, Jacob Tremblay, and newcomer Kylie Curran. There is a great cast of characters in this movie, and like you were saying, Rebecca Ferguson is the standout as one of the best villains in the Stephen King universe, Rose the Hat. She steals every scene that she's in and puts in one of the best villain performances of 2019, and one of the best horror villain performances ever. Ewan McGregor does a really, really great job of playing the broken adult Danny who's hit rock bottom and is just trying to figure out where he needs to go in his life next. Kylie Curran is a totally welcome newcomer. She plays Abra, and I can't wait to see what else she does in the future because she is a very, very gifted young actress. And Mike Flanagan is a master at directing children on a nearly Spielberg-like level. And every child performance in this movie is amazing, from the first scene with the little girl Violet, who was also in Haunting of Hill House, to Jacob Tremblay's sequence, to any scene dealing with Abra. It's just amazingly convincing child performances. The cast that makes up The True Knot is filled with great character actors also. They're a ton of fun to watch work. You can tell that they're having fun playing these just completely demented psychic vampires. The film straddles the line between adapting the book while also being a sequel to Kubrick's film, and it does a fantastic job at both and blending both of those stories together. And I'm sure it's going to please fans of both source materials, with tons of visual nods to Kubrick and a really faithful adaptation of the book as well. It's genuinely creepy throughout the entire 2.5 hour runtime. But it also has a lot more heart than you would expect in a movie like this. It's very, very moving in multiple parts. Don't get me wrong, it's still a very disturbing movie overall, with some truly horrific sequences, especially when it comes to the scenes with the True Knot. But there's a lot of heart and a lot of family in this movie. It's also really, really tightly edited, and the camera work is just as thrilling as the movie itself. That's kind of expected from Mike Flanagan. He is an amazing, amazing filmmaker. If you haven't watched The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix, that's one of the best. I personally think it's the best original Netflix show, and that's Mike Flanagan directed every episode of that show. He also did Gerald's Game on Netflix, which is another fantastic Stephen King adaptation. He did the movie Oculus, which is great. Just has an amazing list of movies that he's made, and I don't think he's ever made a bad one personally. He's always got some of the most creative camera work in the horror genre, no matter which movie or show of his it is that you're talking about. And he does a great job of writing and directing this movie. You can tell he's truly a fan and truly passionate about both source materials, and that makes for an amazing sequel that's worthy of the original in every way. I give Dr. Sleep a 4.5 out of 5.
Oh yeah, you want to move into Oscar talk?
Yeah, definitely. So we're not going to go over everything that happened at the Oscars, but let's talk about some of the our favorite moments from the Oscars. What was your number one just craziest moment that happened at the Oscars?
I mean, it's the same moment as you. It's Parasite winning Best Picture.
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
Happened. My favorite movie won Best Picture for the first time in my lifetime. That's a huge deal. Not only that happened, but it's the first foreign language film to ever win Best Picture. It's insane. It's historic. It's the first South Korean movie to be nominated for an Oscar, and it won foreign language film, and it won Best Picture. It's incredible. Bong Joon-ho deserves every single award that he got. Him winning Best Director was awesome. I think the number one best moment of the entire night was Bong Joon-ho looking at his Oscar for a while, just gazing at it, and then bursting out into laughter because he just can't believe it that he's here, that he got it. I think that also him standing up on that stage, holding his Oscar, going through thanking Martin Scorsese, quoting Martin Scorsese to Martin Scorsese, and then giving a shout out to Quentin Tarantino, which I think is amazing because a lot of people know who Bong Joon-ho is because of Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, I'm one of them. I
exactly.
saw The Host on Tarantino's 2006 list.
That's how a lot of people know who he is, and he recognized that, and he thanked Tarantino for that. Tarantino and Scorsese have been such champions of foreign films and of foreign language films for such a long time. They've been trying to get Scorsese very openly has tried to get other movies of foreign language in the Best Picture contention, but it usually doesn't happen. He is such a champion for foreign films, and Bong Joon-ho recognized him, and it was so cool to see how happy Scorsese was to see a foreign language film beat his own movie. He was just as happy as they were up there to do it, because, like I said, him and Tarantino have been pushing people to see more foreign films and to expand their movie knowledge, and they've been on the forefront of that. And so I think it was really, really special to see Bong Joon-ho give them both moments during his acceptance speech.
Yeah. I think it was really great how he talked about all of the directors that he was up against. And
yeah, except when he goes, and Todd Phillips is nice too.
Yeah,
something like that, which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah,
I mean, what's he gonna say? I like The Hangover.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that Parasite winning 4 awards was definitely the highlight of the Oscars for me as well. Getting to see how increasingly surprised Bong Joon-ho was after each award that he won, thinking that he was going to be done after the first one, it was great. Another great moment was Joker winning original score.
Yes.
That speech that she gave was fantastic. And speaking of good speeches, Joaquin Phoenix, again, with another great acceptance speech that you can tell that he is still kind of beating himself up for the I'm Still Here documentary, fake documentary that him and Casey Affleck made all those years ago, where Joaquin fake lost his mind. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like
it's not just that. He's kind of, famously in Hollywood been kind of a difficult person to work with. And
definitely.
Things like that. And he kind of recognized that in his speech. I thought that was very humbling. And then to echo River and at the very end of his speech was pretty emotional.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, Laura Dern winning. She gave an amazing
speech. I was about to say that was the best speech of the night for me. It was Laura Dern's speech. She said, I'm going to misquote her here, but something along the lines of, they say don't meet your heroes, but I was lucky enough to have my parents be them for me. And then it cuts to her mom, and she's bawling, seeing Laura Dern finally win an Oscar. It's just like, it's so cool. I loved it. There were a lot of people that there were a few people that finally won an Oscar the other night, and Brad Pitt, Laura Dern. Who's the other actor? Joaquin. Yeah. All three of them never previous to Sunday night weren't Oscar winners. Now
Joaquin won for Walk the Line, didn't he?
No.
He didn't?
No, that was his first Oscar.
Really?
Let me look it up.
While you're looking that up, I'll also talk about my other favorite moment from the whole ceremony was the performance of Into the Unknown from Frozen 2 that they did with all of the Elsa voice actresses from around the world. I thought that was so cool, and Idina Menzel's voice is just unbelievable.
Yeah, no, he was just nominated for Walk the Line, The Master, and The Gladiator, and Joker, and then Joker was his first win.
That's so crazy to me. I thought that he would have won for Walk the Line.
Brad Pitt and Laura Dern, too. You just thought they had Oscars. Like, you just thought that both of them had Oscars. They didn't.
Yeah.
But it was cool to see them finally win.
Definitely. Another favorite moment was seeing Taika Waititi get the Best Adapted Screenplay award for Jojo Rabbit. Jojo Rabbit just came out on home release to own digitally, and then it'll be out next week to rent. So if you have not seen Jojo Rabbit, definitely see Jojo Rabbit. It is one of the funniest, most moving movies of 2019, and it absolutely deserved the Adapted Screenplay award.
Yeah, another great moment was Eminem. It was weird, but Eminem just randomly showing up and doing Lose Yourself. Like, he wasn't there at the night that he won the Oscar for that song. I read a really old interview about why Eminem wasn't there at the Oscars. He said, at the time I had no idea what the Oscars were, and so I didn't show up. That was his excuse. He didn't know what they were.
That's crazy.
He thought it was literally, and then he heard he won, and he thought it was for his acting. He didn't realize that it was for the song.
That's so crazy.
But it was cool to see him get to actually perform that song, since he never performed that song, and it's an Oscar-winning song.
Yeah.
That was really cool. If we're done talking about good things, and I can just rant for a second about the opening number,
Yeah.
The Janelle Monáe opening number was complete bullshit, and it was really offensive. To go out there and you have her almost the entire time dressed as the May Queen from Midsummer, the number one movie on people's snubs list of award season, basically, is Midsummer. It got shut out at pretty much all the award seasons, especially the Oscars, and there are lots of things it could have been nominated for. Maybe costumes, because it had the best costumes of the year. Production design, and they recognize it in this opening number. And on top of that, you have 1917 like World War I soldiers like can dancing next to Queen and Slim characters can dancing, which is very disrespectful. If there's a movie made that shouldn't have people dancing in the background of the Oscars, it's definitely Queen and Slim. The movie deals with a lot of shit, and it's an extremely sensitive subject matter, and then it's just kind of weird and flippant and disrespectful to have them just like dancing in the background with those costumes. Like, let's just recognize all these movies that we fucked over and could have given nominations to. We'll recognize how good the costumes are by having them out here dancing, but then we're not going to give them any actual nominations. We're going to recognize that Florence Pugh was so good and so iconic in Midsummer and gave one of the best performances of the entire year. We're going to recognize that in this moment, but we're not going to actually nominate her for that whenever it comes down to it. Like, it's just, I hate whenever they do this, whenever they reference the things that they fucked over. Like, it's not snubbed the things they fucked over, because these movies deserve nominations. Like, I'm surprised they didn't have someone dressed up as Nine-Eye dancing back there. Like, it was fucking stupid. They do it all the time at the Oscars. They have little references to movies that they snubbed, and I don't think it's cool. I hated it.
Yeah, they also had some Dolomite Is My Name costumes up there too, and that's another movie that every one of those movies could have been up for costumes over other ones that were nominated at the very least. There were that kind of blew my mind that it was almost exclusively costumes from movies that weren't nominated in that opening number. That was pretty rough. Any other thoughts on the Oscars?
It was nice that they said the movie that won, and then it actually won.
Yes.
When they finished their speech, when they finished their speech and everyone started chanting up, up, up. That was really cool. They got to actually finish it. But the winner actually won, and he didn't have to say, "Oh no, it was actually this movie." Yeah. So that was pretty cool. They need a host.
You think so?
A host. Like, it needs to. I'm not really feeling this. It feels off to me. It feels weird.
Having someone introduce who's about to walk on stage, who introduces an award.
Yeah, it's just so weird. It feels so off, and then it feels like when we get these glimpses of Steve Martin and Chris Rock, it's like the Oscars being like, "Hey, look, wouldn't it be? How great would it have been if they hosted?" And then Will Ferrell and Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and they're like, "How cool would it have been if they host? Look how funny they were. They could have hosted."
Kristen Wiig and Maya Rudolph.
Like, you keep doing this, just let those people host, because those people are hysterical and like everybody likes them. Why is Tom Hanks not hosting the Oscars every year? He's Tom Hanks. He was up there for like 30 seconds presenting the Academy of Motion Pictures museum that's coming out, and the 30 seconds he was up there was like the smoothest. Like, he made a couple jokes that were hysterical. Like, why is Tom Hanks not up there hosting the Oscars? Like, I don't really. I get it, and it makes me mad why they don't have an Oscar host. Like, and I think that it's because last year the ratings went up last year for the Oscars, and they probably thought that was because they didn't have a host. But I think the only reason that the ratings went down is because people were watching it like, oh, what kind of a train wreck is this going to be without a host? And then it was actually like, okay, and then they're like, oh, the ratings are up. That means people don't want hosts. But then this year, it's the all-time lowest rating for the Oscars ever. I think that's because they didn't have a host. Like, if you don't have that draw, if you don't have Ellen or Tom Hanks or Billy Crystal or whoever up there, then people just aren't super interested if they didn't see the movies that came out. You got to get these people that didn't see the movies to watch the Oscars so that they can see these movies. I think if Ellen is up there hosting, then you're going to get a whole different audience in there, and these people that would have never heard of Parasite otherwise might watch Parasite and make their lives better. There's a lot of arguments being made for having a host in there, and I think that this show needs a host.
Yeah, I agree. So if there's nothing else, I think that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you so much for joining us for another one. We'll be back next week with more thoughts on what to watch. Till then, be sure to subscribe, give us a review, and we will see you all next time.